it really is all about the idea that life is a journey and our children come to us and we are privileged and honored to get to guide and lead and help them find their way forward. And so rather than being...
Welcome to Dad Central, the podcast that helps overwhelmed dads conquer stress, build confidence, and become the father their family brags about. Join me, Drew Solon, a leadership coach and father of 5, and Ed Gow Jr., a fatherhood advocate and contributor to the Good Men Project, as we guide you through the journey of fatherhood. We're going to show you how to connect deeply with your family, manage your time and energy better, and master tools to become the dad you want to be. Let's get started. And today, we're excited to share an episode that we recorded way back in 2023, but it's with Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. Now, she's going to shed light on her unique philosophy around parenting and fatherhood. So here's what we discuss. 3 things that you're going to take away. Number 1, shepherding as a parenting approach. Dr. Vanessa emphasizes the concept of parents as shepherds, guiding and journeying alongside their children rather than dictating or controlling their path. 2, she talks about compassion and self-honesty. Understanding and healing our own childhood wounds allows parents, especially dads, to show up more effectively. We must learn to accept and forgive ourselves to nurture both personal and family growth. And 3, connection over correction. Moving from a behaviorist to a developmentalist approach transforms parenting. It helps us build a deep connection with our children and empowers them to grow resilient and well-rounded. Now, this episode is full of practical advice and heartfelt stories, and so I think it's a must listen for dads, and we're excited to share it with you again. Well, before I do that, we should remind everyone that the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And actually, it is a beautiful connection that Dove Men Plus Care enabled us to have this conversation, to have our guest today. And so our guest is Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. She is a mom, a registered psychologist, a parenting educator, a best-selling author, international speaker, and a regularly invited media guest. She's also the founder and director of the Wishing Star Lapointe Developmental Clinic. She's been supporting families and children for almost 20 years and has previous experience in community mental health and the school system. And so Dr. Vanessa is known for bringing a sense of nurturing, understanding, and humanity to all of her work. And I'm actually excited to hear her bring that to this conversation today. Her passion is in walking alongside parents, teachers, care providers, and other big people to really see the world through the child's eyes. And she believes that if we can do this, we are beautifully positioned to grow up our children in the best possible way. And so I'm excited to have Dr. Lapointe on the show and have a great conversation.
Let's bring her on.
And welcome.
And for people, we want you to know, what do you think is Dr. Lapointe's favorite color? We're not going to say, right? Dr. Lapointe, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm thrilled to be on with you guys. Thank you for asking.
Excellent. You know what? I'm going to jump right into it. And when Drew was sharing your bio, the term walking along.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Because I know it's not the way we usually start our conversation, but when Drew shared that phrase, walking along, when it comes to parenting, can you expound on that?
You know, it really is all about the idea that life is a journey and our children come to us and we are privileged and honored to get to guide and lead and help them find their way forward. And so rather than being, the big, heavy experts as the parents and all the things, our job is to really shepherd and to come alongside our children and be part of the journey.
Wow, you dropped another knowledge bomb word, shepherding.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I've heard that term in parenting in a long, long time.
I like to keep it unique,
I see that. Drew, sorry I had to jump in there, but I just needed to get there in that real moment. So Drew, come on back for me.
Well, I think it's a great jump in because it really, for me, I think it's your philosophy. And the word that comes to mind when I hear that is connection. As I've talked about on our show, and Ed hears me, I say it all the time, John Maxwell, he's one of my mentors, I'd say. And, his book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, years ago, really just transformed my ability to relate with everyone. And of course, I brought that home. And I brought it to my relationship with my children. And so this idea of walking alongside is essentially the thesis of this book. So the way to connect is to you go to someone else's world first, and you meet them where they're at, and then you walk with them together to where you can both achieve things. And so that's what stood out to me. And I think it's foundational, I would imagine, to your approach. And I can't wait to talk more about it and hear, how do we as dads live that out in our roles, both as parents, but also as partners, just as men. So, but yes, Ed, normally what I would like to do for the show is get a little bit of the backstory, right? So you probably don't wake up one day and have that philosophy. There's a story that everyone has. Is we really like to start with us. So could you, Dr. Vanessa, we're going to ask you, can you tell us about your background, maybe the early years and what life was like for you growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up on the Canadian prairies in a very, very, very small town. So small that there's no traffic lights. And with all of the farming area surrounding it included, there were 1,200 people.
Whoa.
So it was a different kind of growing up experience. I had a lot of open space to explore and adventure and become. I was out riding horses bareback in the river by the time I was 5 by myself.
Wow, my daughters would be jealous.
Oh, yeah. That was the kind of upbringing that I had. And my parents were salt of the earth, are salt of the earth kind of people who both came into their experience of parenting with wounds, as we all do. And I look back on it now, particularly with the knowledge that I have present day, and really am just in awe of how well they managed, given the experiences that would have shaped their minds when they were children. And it was those minds that they brought to the parenting of me. Now, if I were going to describe myself temperamentally, I often talk about that there are orchids and then there are dandelions. And the dandelions, they're quite robust, and you can plant them in a crack in the cement in the sidewalk and forget to water them and they'll do just fine. And the dandelions are the ones that like twitch when the wind blows. The orchids are the ones that twitch when the wind blows. You can't walk away from that. And orchid humans tend to be incredibly sensitive and incredibly affected by the environment around. And so for both the positive side of that and the challenging side of that, my parents gifted me the ups and the downs, and those ups and the downs really did shape who it is that I am today. Of course, I've had things to heal from those experiences. And I've also really come to understand, I was speaking with my dad, of course, just yesterday, being Father's Day, and I was telling him a story about a little bit of a challenge that I'm having in my life right now and how I was responding to it all. And he said, "Whew, you really are your father's daughter." where you carry those pieces forward too. And so I think I had a very interesting kind of childhood, and not the childhood that a lot of people probably think I had. I dropped out of high school in grade 10, which, I have a doctoral degree and I practice as a psychologist. And I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, wait, what?" How did that happen? And where did you come from? So there were challenges along the way, and I found my way through.
I want to jump in there. Growing up in a very small town, did you have other parents that were like family? Was it a big family sort of thing? Because in a small town, they always say like nothing's private. Everyone knows each other. Did you have that experience growing up?
If you were naughty at all, like you could be on the other side of town, you could be hanging out in somebody's barn, like you were nowhere near home, your parents would hear about it in 5 minutes. So there really was that experience of the village. There's a lot of eyes and a lot of grown-ups who are collectively caring for the children. And I think that's one of the things about being from a small town. It naturally exists. I don't think that parents today always naturally have access to the village. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that they face.
So, yeah. That's good. Well, you also referenced, especially just having a conversation with your father yesterday, and his, you are your father's daughter. I'm curious, could you talk to us a little bit about the relationship with your father growing up and how that maybe has contributed to or led to where you're at now?
Yeah. So my dad, who I feel very joined with, was a worker.
Hmm.
And he worked sun up to sundown, whatever it was that he had going on at the time. He was all in and very focused on that. He also lived big. He's a very sensitive, very expressive kind of man. He's got French blood running through his veins, trained as a chef, cooked for the Queen.
Wow.
So he's had sort of this interesting life, and I always really admired those things about him. My dad also came from a family, again on the Canadian prairies, where his parents didn't have the best shot when they were kids. So his own father was orphaned at the age of 5 and was riding the rails by the age of 7 to gather food and survive. Imagine a 7-year-old child who's just out on their own, trying to make the best of it. Married my paternal grandmother at the age of 16, 1 week before he left to go fight in the war. And he was gone at that point, of course, for many years. And so he obviously was a man who struggled, and that struggle trickled down onto his children. And some of the stories that I hear my dad tell, and he loved his father. So there's huge compassion and huge empathy for the struggle, and also was very much at the effect of his father's wounds. Then my dad came into this life. He had 4 children and all of us girls. So you can imagine what he was faced with as he walked through his journey when we were younger. And he had the wounds to show for what he had lived through in his own childhood. And those wounds came forward at times when he was unable to hold on to big emotions that he was having. Very different from his own father. He had certainly healed and come a long way from what he had been exposed to as a child. And we were at the effect of that as children. And so I think we had this quite, I don't want to say traditional, but I think you guys will know what I mean, experience as kids, in that we had the dad who worked really hard and sometimes got kind of yelly, shouty, and explosive. And then we had the mom who was scurrying around trying to keep all of the children sorted and settled so that the dad would be sorted and settled. And in between all of that, we were just a regular family that had all the usual hilarious moments with a dad who would pretend to be a bucking bronco and, bounce around the living room trying to buck you off his back, and all the things that kids do with their dads.
What qualities have you carried on from your father that you have today?
I think I lived big and lived loud, same as my dad. He always has that sparkle in his eye where like at any moment something's going to come out his mouth, or he's going to do something that will have your jaw on the ground and you will be in stitches. It'll be so hysterical. I feel like I have that sort of, like sassy side to me that I got from my dad. I work like my dad. I am a worker through and through and have always been like that, whether it was, when I was a student, when I was an athlete, now as a professional, I'm always working like my dad was working. And I also, my dad, he never worked for other people, because that was just not a good situation. So he was always his own boss. He always had his own businesses. And part of that is because he didn't really love being told what to do. And I think I'm a little like that. My husband likes to joke. There's this idea in the developmental literature of something called counter will, where we have the instinct that we want to do the opposite of what is being asked of us if we're not feeling joined and connected with the person when they ask those things of them. And my husband likes to joke that I don't actually have counter will. I have counter won't, because I just am like, there ain't nobody that's going to tell me what to do.
Okay. Drew, this is good.
I mean, I just want to more comment on this. Yeah, and I think I picked it up early on when you were sharing a little bit more of your background, but certainly there, as you spoke about your father, is the sense I got is there's a strong sense of honor and honoring to parents, or to, our parents. And I have heard, some of your talks as well. And that sense of, we can all have very varying backgrounds, some more challenging than others, some are more painful than others. But, and you referenced, not all of it was easy. Sounds like you've had some challenges, but you're still going forward. You're still surviving, but you're doing it from a place of honor
and compassion and kindness, I sense, in terms of how you speak about your child. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe how you got there, or is that important? Just curious. That's just the sense I got.
You are very intuitive. I think that that's incredibly important. I am divorced from the father of my own children. I went through that whole struggle with the restructuring of my family, and there were lots of challenges that came forward with all of that. And as I was in the midst of that particular dark night of my soul, I really realized that I was struggling to journey along myself without a guide. Even though I'm a psychologist and I'd done all the studying and wrote the books and did all of the things, I really needed somebody to sit in my corner with me and talk me through some of those things. And one of the first things that my teacher and mentor, Gila Golub is her name, and I just am so, so thankful to have crossed paths with her in this lifetime. She said to me, Vanessa, when you heal with your parents, your whole life can work. And the idea is that the relationship that we have with our parents, even as adults, the 1-year-old version of us is still inside of us, and the 2-year-old version of us is still inside of us, and the 12-year-old version of us is still inside of us, and the 24-year-old, she was really great, version of us is still inside of us. And so even as an adult, you still have all of those formative experiences with your parents inside of you. And it is the parent-child relationship that is our very first relationship. It creates the template that we will then replicate in all of our other relationships. And so if we can journey back in time and really come to a place of peace and respect and honor and compassion about the things that maybe didn't go so well, and you can heal around all of those things, then your whole life can work, because that template then will shift and you will see that reflected in all of the other relationships that you have. I think that I always kind of had that sense in me from my parents. I really have never been at odds with them. And I think being able to go deeper in really getting that they did the very best that they could at the time that they were parenting, with the resources that they had, and given what it was that they had come from in their own childhood. And so it all sort of comes together, and really, the miracle always is when you have a shift in perception. And I would say that my perception has forever changed once you see that, like, really everybody everywhere is doing the best they can. They really are. In every given moment, even if their best has you going, oh, that's horrible. Everybody everywhere is doing the very best they can. And when we can see people and the world, and especially our own people, through that kind of lens, everything just gets a whole lot easier.
Okay. That's great. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Let's talk about your parenting philosophy. Where did it come from, and what motivated you to develop it? And I think some of the stuff you've already shared may be part of this conversation piece.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew on a personal level that I really wanted to show up for my children. I always dreamed of becoming a parent. I always wanted that in my life. And so I knew that I would show up and endeavor to do that in the best way possible. And then, interestingly, I got real sidetracked, because off I went to do, a bunch of graduate degrees in psychology, where I learned a lot of things. And what I didn't understand at the time is that I would soon need to unlearn all of the things that I had learned, because they were not relevant, or they were antiquated in their theoretical foundations or other kinds of things. And so, it turns out I got pregnant unexpectedly at the end of the first year of my doctoral program. I actually thought I had mono. And then I was like, wait a second. And sure enough, one thing led to the next. And I realized about 5 hours later that I was actually pregnant with my first son. And it was interesting to be bringing a child into the world while studying developmental psychology. And my son was born. And of course, the voices around you are very loud. You should do this with him, and you should do that with him, and you should do this. And I remember feeling like I had kind of lost my way. I was all I could hear was the loudness of all these other voices, which meant that I wasn't listening to my voice. And there was one particular day when some of those voices had become very loud about the fact that my 6-month-old baby, or however old he was, wasn't sleeping through the night yet. And the pressure was on to sleep train him. And the philosophy that I ascribed to would not call for cry it out kind of sleep training methods. But there I was, letting my baby cry it out, sitting outside his bedroom door, on the floor, sobbing, because it was against every cell in my body that I had left my child to cry this way. And there was something that happened, like this energy came into me, and it was like, I talk about having great mother, great father moments, like when Gandalf like slammed his staff into the ground and he was like, "Thou shalt not pass." I felt for the first time in my life that swell in me of, oh, this is not the way that's going to go. And so y'all can take a seat right now, because I'm going to parent my child the way that feels resonant with what it is that I know philosophically and otherwise. And that experience led me on a journey to begin to study with a lot of the great masters in terms of the world of attachment and connection, and the importance of that as we parent our children, what the science is behind all of that. And from there, I began to reshape a lot of my own parenting practices. I began to speak quite a lot at different kinds of events about those sorts of things. And eventually from that emerged this philosophy that I bring forward to all of the parents that I support now, and the writing that I do, and the speaking that I participate in. So it kind of organically grew out of something, but I did have to unlearn most of my formal training, which was, I would say there's sort of two camps when it comes to psychology and children. One camp is what we call behaviorist child raising, and the other camp is what we call developmentalist child raising. So I had to unlearn what it was to be a behaviorist and really step into my full truth as a developmentalist.
That's great.
Wow. Was there any challenging moments having to unlearn?
Oh yeah, I got divorced.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how that links in. Because when I got married, I married somebody who had very, very different ideas. And ironically, but of course not randomly, that started to become a very challenging point in our marriage, where we had a lot of disagreements about how our children should be raised and what that should look like. And it got pretty loud and pretty awful. And I don't know at the time that I handled it so well. I think that I was full of a lot of blame and a lot of shame, which led to more blame in terms of what my then husband was thinking was the way to go. And I spent a lot of time shutting him down rather than listening to him, which I would do differently if I were to have a do-over and all of that. And ultimately, that would have been the big issue that led to the demise of our relationship. We were never able to resolve that in the relationship. And so the unlearning of the behavior stuff, stepping into the developmentalist stuff, that was kind of easy compared to being able to hold ground and still have compassion and respect for the people around me, namely my children's father, who didn't see it the same way and wanted to journey a different way. And I would say, it's a different thing nowadays as a professional, because there's just something about that dynamic that maybe opens people up to the message a little bit more swiftly than what I could manage with my then husband. And it's still a challenge. There's still, I'm very active on social media, and every day I have people commenting and messaging me about like how foolish it is that I think connection and compassion are the way through, that kids really need to be shown who's boss and all the other things. And so I think it's really about the most challenging part in terms of the unlearning would be figuring out how to navigate that alongside people who think very differently.
Well, before Drew jumps back in, I want to really bless you for your honesty. Right? not a lot of individuals I meet or encounter at your level are honest about some of their journey. So I really want to bless you, and I think that's part of your power and your strength about your honesty, capped in with a wonderful smile. That it's a wonderful thing. So I just want to bless you for that.
Thank you. I received that.
Yeah, well said, Ed. And I think to add to Ed's point, the ability to unlearn requires that level of honesty with yourself. And if you're going to grow through these difficult moments, these challenging periods of life, you have to be willing to look at yourself in the mirror, honestly. And so I think that's definitely important. So again, echoing Ed's comments to you, I really appreciate that. I think it's a very powerful example, and very important. Not easy at all, but I think very important.
Yeah. When we can accept ourselves for all of the things that we've done well and all of the missteps that we've had along the way, when we can have grace for ourselves and be kind and gentle with ourselves, that we too are doing the best that we can in this given moment, taking into account all of the setting events around us and historically. When we can do that for ourselves, we can do that for other people. And it's it's an inside job that the world then begins to reflect back. And so I think that, that ability to be honest, I wasn't always that. I would say, had you interviewed me, 10, 15 years ago, I would have been what I called the glossy facade, Dr. Vanessa. And just letting that, melt away, it allows me not only the compassion for myself in the journey, but also for others.
Dr. Lapointe, how important is that for our dads and our parents, what you just shared, to take that journey, to get to that point? And not only how important it is for them, but how is it important in their parenting and the impact on their children?
I think it's everything. I always say to parents, after me, you come first. Like, that needs to be our philosophy as parents, that we need to really grow ourselves in order to be able to grow up our children. The world is full of children walking around in the form of adult bodies. Just because we are adult in form doesn't mean that we are adult of mind and of heart. And if we want to do a great job of growing our children and showing them the way, we need to have done that for ourselves. Children aren't meant to raise other children. So it is upon us to step into that and to really connect with how, when we're okay, so too will the children be okay.
Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs. But not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like-minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step-by-step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca
dads. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I really appreciate all of this part of the conversation, but I'm hoping we can go into some of the areas now that you've certainly you've written a book, Discipline Without Damage. One of the areas that dads, I think, maybe struggle with is maybe keeping their cool, staying calm or patient in the face of challenging behavior. Maybe they are behaviorists or raised by behaviorists. We want to say that, but still, I think they struggle with it because they don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They want to have a good relationship with the kids. They want to have kids that connected with. They want to be but they find themselves it happening. So I don't know, maybe you can, it's broad, but maybe you can just open it up by saying, how would you help a dad to find a way through this if he finds himself being impatient more than he wants to?
Mm-hmm. That's such a great question. And to answer it, there's sort of two layers. Okay. One is that I would be wanting to fill that dad up with compassion for himself, given where it is that he's come from. And using some broad sweeping brushstrokes, we know, first of all, scientifically, that boys are born actually more sensitive than girls, which means that the experiences that they have when they are little, particularly in cultures that, I'll give you something to cry about and suck it up, princess, and, all of those kinds of things. When our boys are exposed to that kind of reactivity, when they are first expressing their emotions, those emotions get shut down pretty quick. And that grown-up dad, when he was a child, he didn't ask for that to happen. That was just the way that it went down. And we don't blame his parents either. We acknowledge that that was the way it occurred, and that the experience for him would have been very much like if you take a beach ball. And you can think about that beach ball being the emotion that needs to come forward in all of us as human beings. And as a little boy who's being told to, suck it up, princess, and I'll give you something to cry about, and, boys don't cry, and all of those kinds of horrible messaging, whether they get it very openly or more covertly, every time the emotion gets shut down, the beach ball gets a little pushed a little further under the surface of the water. And then the next shutdown under the surface of the water, and then the next shutdown. And you know what happens when you take a beach ball and you push it really deep into the water? It is going to explode through the surface. And then we all sit back and think to ourselves, I don't know why you're so angry. I don't know why you get so shouty all the time. Why men get so shouty all the time is that they have often, for years beforehand, been denied the opportunity to express emotion like human beings need to express emotion. And when you couple that, and I say all of this with love, there's no blame and shame, it's just how we've done it for years and years. When you couple that with the idea that a lot of girls and women are similarly taught, they onboard a message that anger is a bad thing. And so then as girls and women, we have this reaction to the anger, which actually shuts the man down further. And so now we're off to the races, because now we have somebody who is not, as a human, not permitted to be who it is that they are, and not allowed to express what it is that's within them. Not that we're making space for anybody, anywhere, to be abusive or any of those kinds of things, and that we are humans. We are meant to feel all of the feelings, the crest of that feeling, and also the very deep, dark depths of it. There's this beautiful preschool teacher that I've followed along with for years by the name of Teacher Tom. And he says, the cry has to be cried until the cry is done. Like, let it happen all the way. Because when a ball falls to the earth, it hits the ground and compresses. Just like your emotion, when you let it go all the way down, it'll hit the ground and compress, and then you get the bounce back. And so I think that dads often end up in the position of being the reactive parent, because that's where they came from. Then what happens is they feel bad about that. And all anger in us as adults, maybe not all, but a lot of our anger is a projection of guilt. So now we feel guilty because we're being the reactive parent. So then we're more reactive because we feel guilty. So we just feed it. And the idea would be for all the men everywhere, and especially the men who are dads or who are what I like to call gap fillers, stepping in as a father figure for another child, for all those men to just know that that is the reason why that happens, that they can have compassion for themselves. And in connecting with that compassion, they can show up as the truth of who they are, not being at the effect of all the other stuff, but their actual core truth. And their core truth is that they love their children and they want to do right by them. I started my career working in child protection, and we had a lot of parents who arguably had done some not great things to their children.
Mhm.
Every single one of them loved their kids and wanted to do right and just didn't know how to tap into grace for self so that they could show up with grace for their children.
Mhm.
I don't even remember your question, but there's my answer.
There's so much involved in that, but that last part in particular reminded me of, we had Dr. Charles Daniels. He's the founder of Fathers Uplift in the United States, and one of the core elements of his approach is the idea of helping fathers forgive themselves and love themselves. And from that place where they can begin to rebuild, re-engage, and reconnect in the relationships in a healthy way. And so that last part really reminded me of Dr. Charles Daniels and the core of his approach to overcoming the external of yelling, being impatient. That was the question, right? It was, how do you help a dad who loves his child, finds himself getting really impatient and intolerant, and then struggles? And what you described, the two cycles that are involved in that process that a dad really needs to. And so it sounded to me like recognizing that you have these emotions and it's okay to feel them, not guilty, not judgmentally. And like it's okay to have those emotions, but you got to recognize them first, but then processing them in a healthy way as opposed to an unhealthy, because I think you described the negative cycle, the unhealthy part of it. So anyways, it was really valuable. So I just want to say thanks so much. So Ed, I'll turn over to you.
Yeah, just the last few minutes, what resonates in my mind is the complexity of fatherhood. Because I'm a practitioner. Before he became a dad, he was a man. And a lot of times we forget about the man part. We concentrate on the father part. Yeah. So I love how you shared there about the complexities of manhood and how it adapts or can clash with the fatherhood, because if he's having challenges as a man, that's not a good setup for fatherhood.
Can I hop in here? That's the one that you tweak something, Doctor, when you shared about the dynamic of how girls were raised versus me, how the boys were raised, and then you grow up, and then there's that dynamic of, I think you might have described a lot of maybe homes, a lot of partnerships, a lot of relationships. So let's say someone heard this and they're like, wow, that's kind of us. What's the next step? How do you move forward from there to both be more effectively engaged in terms of parenting, but also more effectively engaged maybe even in that dynamic there?
Yeah. What is to the greatest good of self will be to the greatest good of all. And if I am only for self, then who am I? Which really, like, the answer is buried in that idea that we individually must care for the wounded child within in order to be able to show up as our true selves as adults. And, it is rare that I meet a couple who are parenting together who aren't at odds with each other about how that's all going and how it's supposed to be going and what so-and-so is doing wrong and what so-and-so is doing wrong. And so it's within each of us, it's upon each of us to find our way to what I call the peak of the mountain, where we are able to internally, from a space of maturity, hold on to the balance of firm and kind within each of us at the same time. It's not up to mom to be the gentle one and dad to be the disciplinarian or whatever it is, that it's upon each of us to make sense of why we shy away from the things that we do as parents, why we struggle with the things that we do as parents, and how we can step in. And that's not a two-person job, that's a one-person job. Okay. That within the father, he tends to himself and cares for himself so that he understands what it is that he's bringing to the table. And within the mother, she does the same. And when I'm working with a couple, I will often separate them for the sessions, because we really have to do our own work. As adults, we cannot get that from the outside world. We must create it within our inner world. And so it isn't upon my way from my husband to care for me and make this easier for me. It's upon me to do that for me, because I believe in my value and in my worth as a human being.
Yeah.
Nice.
I agree with that. And I say it for dads, I also say it for moms. Even strong parents struggle.
Hell yeah.
But, well, obviously you're working very closely with, with parents, teachers, people who are influencing children.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously our show is about dads. So I'm wondering, can you talk about what's maybe the most common mistake that you hear dads making in this whole parenting process? And then how can they correct it would be the follow-up.
Yeah. So I think the most common mistake would be that dads act out on the belief that, a little bit of weight on the shoulders now will keep their feet on the ground later. So there's this default to this idea that we need to grow our children up to be toughened to the world that they are living in. The corrective philosophy maybe is that it's not our job to grow children up to be hardened. It is our job to grow our children up to be hardy. And our job along the way is to make sure that we are both, the soft landing and the launching pad, that we provide in equal balance that experience for our children of us being compassionate and caring and full of love and full of heart and full of softness. And in the moments that call for it, that we step in and we be, the one that reminds about the expectation, reminds about the boundary, reminds about the rule, reminds about the norm, whatever it is, that we're able to do that at the same time, so that we are stepping away from this belief that we need to toughen them up into this belief that it is our job to allow them to be hardy. And it's a shift in perception. When you can grab it, then I always say the doing, how you will act with your children, flows from the being. So get your being sorted out. It's about the belief system and the inner world of you. And then you don't even need me. You don't need the books. You don't need the anything, because you'll have this sorted out. The doing will flow from the being. The rest of it takes care of itself when you get the being sorted out. Hardy, not hardened.
Yeah, I like that. Hardy versus hardened. Hardy to me speaks to the ability to weather the storm, kind of like resilience. Hardened speaks to, cold and, harsh potentially.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
Nice. Another question for you, conversation piece. What are the strengths dads do bring to parenting? And how important do you think it is that dads have support in the parenting journey?
I think, first off, so important for dads to have support. If we look back at, the literature around child raising and child development and the parent-child relationship and all those kinds of things, dads have been horrifically underrepresented for a very long time. We are starting to see the pendulum shift and starting to see that people are really, taking note of the idea that dads need to be part of all of that as well. And so I think incredibly important for dads to be included in that conversation and honored as part of what they're doing. The research in terms of long-term outcomes for children who have positive relationships with their fathers is irrefutable. We know that benefits kids. So let's champion dads to be the very best that they can be. I have the great privilege at this stage of my life to have remarried and to be married to somebody who's, one of my girlfriends said the other day, he's so woke. But he's very aware of a lot of, the pieces that we spoke about today.
Right.
And he and I have a lot of very honest conversations about parenting. We're in similar lines of work. And one of the things that I think dads, in terms of their strengths and what they can bring to parenting that might be different from moms, is that they're really good at holding on to kind of like the reality of the circumstance. And so, if my husband and I are in a certain moment and I'm being very, I like to call it like when I jellyfish. So instead of, having a spine and a backbone as a parent, I kind of get a little like, I'm like, don't worry about doing your chores tonight. You're tired. You should go to bed. And my husband, who knows that I will just be resentful about that in the morning and knows that those things need to be taken care of, he's the one that's able to be like, oh, let's just like reality check this for a second. They can say that they're tired. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're off the hook for whatever it is, because everybody else is tired too. So we're gonna like reality check, and let's step in, step up, and hold on to the realness of the situation. I feel like he's able to sort of stay rooted in that a little bit more firmly than I am. And I think that kind of thing in dads is maybe their gift because of the upbringing. There's the gold and all of that too, right? And even, my children's father, there are things that he has done with our children over the years where I think, like, what? You did what with them? And I'll tell you what, my boys talk about those things to this day as like the best moment ever. Like they loved it and found parts of themselves in that, realized their adventurous spirits and all of that. And so I think there's that beautiful balance that men and fathers can bring to that role because of how they're socialized and the gold and all of that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed so much, but I'm going to ask one more question. Pardon?
I got one too. So you.
Oh, Ed, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ed.
Okay, no
problem.
problem.
I'm going to ask my question.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
What advice would you have for dads who want to raise healthy, confident kids? And that's what our show is about. Practical advice. Dads can take something from today, go apply it right away in their situation. What advice would you have for them?
I would say the truth of who you are is you are all of it. You are the up and the down of it, and the here and the there of it, and the left and the right of it. And when you can make peace with all of the spaces inside of you and all of the reactions that you have, when you can be at peace with all of that bigger picture, you will find your way forward. I would also say that any child who has a father that is willing to ask themselves those kinds of questions is a lucky child.
Okay. Good stuff.
Thank you.
I'll just ask something real quick. Ever since you've come on this screen, I've looked at those words on your wall. How can you share those words on your wall for the dads and fathers and those who love them who will be watching and listening to this conversation?
I love this. So the words are the mantra that I landed on many years ago and share with anybody who will listen. See it, then feel it, then be it. And I think so much of parenting over the years has been about seeing it, and that's where it begins and ends. We see something, we don't like it, we squash it, and that's the end. The child hit their sibling, we don't like that, we squash the behavior, and we carry on. The issue with that is that there's no time spent on understanding the inner world of the child or the inner world of the parent. And so the feel it, which if you were to see the wall behind me, the word feel it has two little hearts floating right beside it. Mm-hmm. The feel it is about making sure that we feel it for our children. If your child's acting out or engaged in some kind of challenging behavior, I can tell you 100% they're not doing that for a good time. They're doing that because they are communicating that something's not working out for them. So our job is to go behind the behavior and into the core of the child and feel for them what's happening. The challenge is that we often cannot feel that for our children if we are locked down in our own triggers, which have us very full of our own feels. Like, I gave you life, and that's how you're talking to me. Like we have these reactions, and so we have to feel it for ourselves. And we have to feel it for our children. And then from that space of understanding the emotional world of both of us, we get to be it. And the doing, how we will then step in as parents, flows from that being. So we see it, we move beyond the facade into the feeling of it. And once we feel it, it shifts our being from the being comes the doing.
There we go. Drew?
Well, that's great. I think in particular for that last one, maybe dads out there will resonate this, maybe they won't. One of the things that happens is they see the disrespect or they see the defiance, and they never get to the point of like feeling like what's going on, and they get triggered by that. And that's an area that if you're a dad, you're listening, think about this. What happens when you feel disrespected? What happens when you feel like that your child's defying you? And then figure out what's going on there. Because I think that can be one of those keys to help with that, being calm and patient. But Dr. Lapointe, really honored to have had this conversation. Love obviously the content, the wisdom, the nuggets like that Ed was talking about that you shared with us. But obviously people will want to get to know more about you. So where can they go to learn more about you? Tell them how they can find out more.
So Dr. Vanessa Lapointe with an E on the end.com is my website. And I have lots of information on there about the Self-Guided Discipline Without Damage course, which is a 7-week-long course that parents can do on their own time. All the information about my books and my speaking is also on there. I have a lot of different articles that I've written over the years on different topics that parents are welcome to access. Some of those are resources that you can print out to be reminded of ways to kind of find your way forward, full of the ideas that we've been talking about today. And I'm also very active on social media, Dr. Vanessa Lapointe on Instagram and Dr. V Lapointe on Facebook. I put out a lot of videos in terms of comments on different kinds of things, because I feel like the talking often really helps parents to find their way forward. I did put up a video just yesterday, especially for dads, and full of the kinds of information that we've been talking about today as well.
That's great.
Fantastic. Well, we'd like to say on behalf of the Dad Central family, thank you so much for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule for everything you have, are, and will be doing for fathers and their families and families just in general. And as always, we want to say, make sure you give yourself grace, you yourself too, not just the parents you help. And also don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and look forward to having you back on again. And we're more than happy with anything that we can help you do to further the cause.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a very fast hour, which means that, time flies when you're having fun. It's been an honor to sit with you both.
Be well.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. That was a beautiful conversation, Drew. What did you take home from that?
It really did stand out to me early on, the honor. And I think it even came through in talking about, painful process, the divorce and, her children's father. And so to me, I think that's a very important message, especially if you find yourself in that situation as a family, and you've got some pain, some wounds, some things that trigger you, and getting to a much, I would say, healthier place where you can actually choose to honor and recognize. Doesn't mean that it takes it away. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but that for me stood out. So really important.
First thing it says, I want a part 2. That's my first comment. I want a part 2.
I could have said that too, but
yeah. But one of the many knowledge bombs, and it happened very early. The vision of a shepherd. That word is resonating in my head for dads. You're a shepherd to your child and children, and sheep can be soft, and I know the shepherd has that staff, but he has to be sometimes have some authority, but also have some softness.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that in a long time in regards to the shepherding. You hear it more with adults and all that, but the shepherding piece was quite powerful for me. Right from the beginning. Like I could have just landed right that for the whole hour right there, but we had to go through other stuff. But that's what I'm saying. Part two. So as we close off, as always, we want to say the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dublin Plus Care. Dublin Plus Care believe that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. We also have some other things. Also, we have Drew. Quickly, want to talk about Dad Mentor?
No, I think people will have heard about it during the show. So
okay, all right, no problem. But you want to touch base with us? Email us, podcast@dadcentral.ca. Tell us what you think about conversations like this. Any other guest suggestions, ideas, anything that you want to talk about fatherhood, we're there for you. You can listen to replays of epic conversations like this at dadcentral.ca/podcast. And we have a pile of free resources also at our website, dadcentral.ca. So as always, we like to say to dads and their families and those who care about them, make sure you give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching and share the information out. Be well.